Morena.
Good morning, all.
Morning.
It's now 9 o'clock. Di, are you all good?
Yes, we're all good and we're live.
We're all good and we're live. Tēnā koutou katoa. Welcome everyone back to our reconvened council meeting.
You're Andrew.
I think it would be fair to say we're probably all suffering from a bit of cabin fever at the end of the day, so I hope you've had a chance to recover. So we'll go to the item 7.2, Manuhira Kia non-regulatory support initiatives, and I imagine it's Gwyneth, but I'll just run through the intro. This is the report to seek direction from council on potential initiatives in the Manuhira Kia Freshwater Management Unit.
Andrew?
Yes.
Sorry, there's a whole lot of mics that are on that we can hear noise behind. Could people turn their mics off, please?
Yep.
It's really noisy.
Has everyone got that message? Anita, Michael D. Michael D.
Yeah, I'm getting there.
No worries. Thank you. Okay. So this is a report seeking direction from council on potential initiatives in the Manuhira Kia Freshwater Management Unit that will or would complement the regulatory water management regime being proposed for the land or the new land and water plan. There's a couple of attachments there as well. And essentially staff recommendation is, there's 5 recommendations. The first one's to note the report. The second one is to note that there's a comms plan that's going to be developed over the next wee while. And I believe, based on the report delivered in September, October, I assume that might be going to governance, comms and engagement prior to that. The third recommendation essentially is what can be done over the next 12 months within the existing budgets, etc. The fourth one is looking at any additional initiatives that will have budgetary implications, which is covered off on the 5th recommendation. So Gwyneth, would you like to make any comment with regards to this is a report that you produced?
Yep. So as you've indicated, it was intended as a complementary paper to item 7.1. It reflects information that councillors provided to us at the workshop on the 12th of the 8th. You'll notice, you'll see from the paper itself that there was clear direction for some of the initiatives in terms of support for ORC involvement, and others it was not as clear. So what we're proposing was for those 3, the capacity building, education on water management, the catchment groups and the MyPerium works, that we would proceed to develop up work programs specific to the Manuhira Kia. And for those initiatives where there wasn't a clear consensus coming from councillors at the workshop, we would do some further workshop with councillors to try and get a narrower scope and understanding of what councillors expected. I guess given where we landed yesterday, I guess it's a matter for decision for the councillors whether you would like us to continue to do this work specific to the Manuhira Kia. Obviously, we do work generally across Otago. I would just note that as you had a paper in the Finance Committee yesterday morning, annual planning process for staff starts now. And that if you would like some of this work to be included in the budgets for 22-23 or potential work to be concluded into 22-23, we as staff need to start working with community and stakeholders to shape up what that looks like now. So we can't, if I guess inference that we might delay a few months will probably put us in a hard position in terms of actually forming up work programs, detailed work programs for the annual plan in 22-23.
Okay, so I suppose the first question is around getting a clear direction about whether this program continues regardless of what the decision was made yesterday. That seems to be a fairly important signal, and I suppose if the recommendations are passed, that clearly indicates that we're asking you to continue on in the same time frame as proposed. But I'm sure that'll be fleshed out during the discussion. But questions for Gwyneth? Hilary.
This is probably just me not understanding, but I had thought that when we filled out things at the workshop, which was like at 3 o'clock in the afternoon or whatever, between 3 and 4 or something, and handed them back, that I had a clear understanding that these were just absolutely top of the head, immediate response. Just, I can't remember what I understood Sarah's words to be, but they seem to have translated from that into, this is a clear direction. You know, lots of people said this and fewer people said that, or this is a clear direction to staff. And I'm just a bit concerned. Either I'm confused about that and we weren't told this is just a visceral response, or...
So in the workshop, So in the workshop, as you remind us, Hilary, we don't make decisions, but we were trying to give an indication so that we could bring a paper to you now, which is now, seeking your direction as to whether or not we should do further work in the non-regulatory space specific to the Manahira Kia. And you gave us an indication at that workshop that in areas which you thought that you would like us to develop up further work, and they're in the paper. And then some areas you were not as clear in consensus, and that's why in the paper we've indicated we'll do further workshop with you to understand whether or not you want us even to develop up work programs in those areas.
Yes, and I appreciate that you've taken those for that purpose, but a clear indication coming from things that we were told were really just a off the top of your head thing. It would be good if you were going to, I mean, they were sort of sprung on us, and that wasn't, I mean, the timeframes are short, and I can appreciate that it makes some sense to have a workshop and near the end of it think, well, how's your thinking going at the moment, and that you want to use that for later. But at the workshop, when I filled in that piece of paper, that wasn't what was going on in my head, and it would be really good if we were going to be had those sorts of things in front of us, if we had them in advance, so as we could give a measured response. So what I guess I'm saying is whatever response I gave was as we were told to do, really off the top of my head. And I do appreciate the work pressures and things, but it just didn't give a clear indication for what I'm saying.
So I think we've got an opportunity under that recommendation to further discuss in a workshop environment what are our expectations in terms of ORC's role going forward. So obviously there's more work to be done in terms of staff getting a clear view of what governance are looking for there. Gretchen, Kate, Alexa.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. Point of order, Mr. Chair. Are we asking questions or are we debating?
We're asking questions.
Because I thought that you were just made a sort of a comment that looked like a bit of a debate. I just want to be clear.
So my comment at the front end about, is that what you're referring to, Marion?
I'm just referring to the last one, that we're going to have to ask staff to do some more work. I think that we're going to actually, that's part of the debate, not a question.
Okay, I'll note that, Marion. Thank you. So we're on questions. So we've got Gretchen, Kate, and Alexa.
Thank you. Thank you, Gwyneth, for the intro comments. Just with regard to what you said then, which was, I think that, there's kind of two components. One's capacity building, catchment programs and riparian works that we would sort of kick off if the recommendations were passed. And then there's more thinking on the more sort of water infrastructure type stuff to do. I think that's what you said. And then I'm just trying to get my head around, then you said how much more we would do in this catchment compared with other catchments in Otago. And yeah, as we know, there's probably bigger water quality, for example, issues in other catchments. I'm wondering how much of these things we would be looking at doing as a whole across Otago in the capacity building, catchment programs and riparian works. Or is it just that we would do more of them, say, in the Manuherikia? Are they going to be done in other areas anyway?
So I can have a go, but Gavin might want to also talk to this. Really, in terms of capacity building, education and catchment groups, we do have existing programs that go right across Otago. So I guess the question, should you pass the recommendation, the question will be about whether or not you scale up significantly more in Manuherikia, or whether the current programs are sufficient. So that's what would have to be discussed with the community and stakeholders. Riparian works, it's a bit of a, as I understand, a bit of a different kettle of fish in terms of what we do now. It might change the type of work program that we do and why we do riparian works. As I understand, we do them largely for flood management purposes, but Gavin might want to talk to that a bit more. In terms of those where there was not general consensus coming out of the workshop, so those more infrastructure-based ones, as you said, they're not areas that we work in specifically at the moment. So that'd be additional.
Thank you.
Kate?
Thank you. I'm really excited to see this report, and in many ways, in hindsight, and again, because this is the first one we're really getting moving. I appreciate we did Arrow and Cadrona, but this is the biggest one. I think we need to really emphasise and concentrate on what, or prioritise this work as far as councillors go and what our expectations are for support. And I'm not just talking about supporting landowners, I'm talking about supporting iwi and supporting environment groups along here. I think so I'm just wondering when, and I can't recall seeing it, when would we be having this workshop?
So the additional ones, so we were only proposing workshops on those specified under 4, so land use change, water transportation efficiency and the water storage initiatives, both on farm and off farm. We had tentatively scheduled, you'll recall we've already had a workshop around water security. We had tentatively scheduled a second workshop on that. So we were probably going to try and build that into those. So you'd be looking in the next, I think it was October. I'd have to come back to you exact months, but it was, months, in a matter of months. Okay.
My frustration, and it's not aimed at staff, I appreciate how long that day was in the workshop, but I think there are other things we can be doing, and that's, for example, facilitating access, at least for iwi, along tributaries, rather than the main stem, I think, is covered by Queen's Chain. And those are sort of things that I would love to know. I'd also like to get down and understand better the risks to urban water supplies in communities that get it off irrigation systems. And I'm not quite sure that everyone understands that. For example, should a whole area decide to give up irrigation, and that could be the one way that they resolve some of the expectations here, what that puts at a cost burden to urban areas. And so understanding those sort of, I think there's some background work we need to do on that as well. Does that make sense? And,
Yeah,
and will we
yes,
have that
and I guess
opportunity?
what we're seeking today is direction to go and do that work.
Well, and so I'm really supportive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're trying to
Okay.
ask, are you happy for us to go away and do some more detailed working and thinking and bringing back as proposals for those 3 items under recommendation 3 for the annual plan, and depending on how far we get with the other ones on under 4, potentially an annual plan for 22-23 on those as well.
Well, not in time of debate. I'm really keen for that, but I do think it'll be really assisted if there was some councillor input at some stage on that, and even more so than just workshops, because I think there's other stories and other things that need to be considered. Thank you.
Alexa?
Question, Gwyneth, do you feel you've got enough structure for non-regulatory action when you don't have a regulatory water management regime with a flow level to work within and towards?
For some of those initiatives, a minimum flow would obviously create the quantum of change needed, but not necessarily all of them. We're kind of not talking necessarily about, we haven't talked yesterday much about water quality, but it is also part of the picture. And quite a number of those, the initiatives forward in this paper talk to water quality. And so I'd say definitely for the first 3, it's not necessary. I don't believe that minimum flow setting is going to, not having a minimum flow setting is going to constrain it in any way, but it will make it more difficult for questions around, for instance, storage. Obviously, if we don't know the quantum, it's hard to know how much storage we're looking at.
Thank you. Thanks.
Michael Laws?
Thank you. There are, as I see it in here, is it 5 recommendations and 3 options, which are sort of 8 decisions, I guess, we have to make, or 6 decisions we have to make. Have I got that right?
Essentially, okay, Gwyneth, you go.
Essentially, yes. Yeah.
Okay. So it's the recommendation 2 that I'm interested in. Without putting too fine a point on it, communications between the ORC and the Manuhira community haven't been what I would call at an apogee. What kind of communication are you thinking about, Gwyneth, with concerns to recommendation 2?
So just before I sort of talk to recommendation 2, obviously there is an ongoing work with the environmental implementation team, right? So there's an ongoing role, BAU role. What I was directing recommendation 2 was just like Arrowcondrona, when we had a position, we went back to the community, explained it, and the rationale behind it. Now, given where we landed yesterday, I'm comfortable that you might want to decide not to note recommendation 2 if you don't want us to go back and communicate to the community where we landed after yesterday and today.
Okay, thank you.
Carmen.
Thank you. Morning, Gwyneth. I just want to further ask on item number 4. You've got these workshops coming up. Can I just seek some clarity? So the land use change, the water transition, efficiency and storage initiatives on and off, are they all separate workshops, please?
If you prefer to treat them separately, we can. We haven't got to that level of design yet, but we could. We've already started the conversation with you around water storage and the water security workshop. Yeah, I'd suggest the transport efficiency one you might want to do with water storage, but we haven't got to that level of detailed design yet. So
I'd love to see if we could. I always find one thing about our workshops, they're great, but sometimes we always run out of time. And that's my asking for clarification. If we could just make sure there's plenty of time for these workshops, that would be appreciated. Thank you.
Gwyneth, just a question from me. You talk about on page 39, or paragraph 10, page 39, where it's referenced the at-risk catchment program, where close to 12 months ago that was announced, that work, and are you talking there about taking advantage of that program with other initiatives, probably what you refer to in recommendation 3? I just wondered, are you able to give us an update how things are progressing there, and just understanding the advantages that we could utilise by dovetailing potentially into that existing program?
Yeah, I'll get Anita to give you a more specific update because she's in regular contact with the person that is running that at MFE. But I would just say in terms of leveraging, I guess it's in the paper. There's $12 million, and as I understand it, it's not allocated to specific catchments. And the longer you wait, you might find the less money there is in that pot. But Anita might be able to give you specifics around the Thompson Creek project and where that's at the moment. That's the main initiative that's being done under that banner at the moment.
Cool, thank you.
So
Thanks,
through
Anita.
you, Chair, I do catch up with MFE weekly, and the Thompson's Creek project, they're just waiting for the project plan to be finalised, and they're also working through I suppose the framework for setting up the governance group that oversees those projects. So it is still moving. It's not lightning speed, but it is still moving along.
Yeah, and I suppose that highlights how a lot of programs on the ground, the actual outcomes, physical outcomes on the ground, do take a bit of time before it actually happens. And I suppose when you look at, I'm not suggesting it would take ORC looking at recommendation 3, that period of lead-in time, but that's the reality, isn't it? It does take a considerable amount of time to get projects up and running, and I know we've got a new boots on the ground approach with the environmental improvement program, and they are ready to go. So I'm sure the ability for action in a shorter time frame as compared with the exemplar one, we've got that ability, we've got that existing capacity. Is that fair to say?
Gavin might want to talk to capacity in his team. I guess I'll just reflect back on the timeframes that Mike Rosser spoke to you about for the annual plan, and I can't remember the exact month, but I think we were coming back to you with initiatives for the annual plan in November, was it? Sometime around that this year. So keeping in mind that we would like to work with community and stakeholders in terms of developing it up, we're in August. So that's actually just a few months away. It's actually quite a tight time frame.
Okay, so I just took it under recommendation 3. That work would be covered with existing budgets.
It is existing budgets, but what we're trying to do is shape budget for 22, 23 and beyond. Yeah. So it takes work to develop those.
Yep. Okay. Yep. So those projects obviously overlap or are ongoing from the current year, financial year, and ongoing. That's what you're saying?
I said before that for 1 and 2, capacity building and catchment groups, we do some work at a regional level already. But if we want to scale up specific to the Manahira Kia, we still need to do the work to shape those work programs ahead of the budget, 22-23 budget.
Okay. Thank you. Was there anything you wanted to add, Gavin, to that question?
Excuse me, just Mr. Chair, just to reinforce what Ms. Elsom has said around that, the riparian works under Resolution 3 have no budget. So that's an entirely new piece of work, and council would need to decide how it would give effect to it. It has some choices. It could be by way of funding grants, or it could be ORC being heavily involved in delivering works and services itself. So there's a whole lot of thinking, not just about the quantum of the finances, but how ORC would deliver that. In respect of our internal capacity for 1 and 2, the catchment advisor team will be made up of 10 people within 3 years' time, and we've presently got a team size of 6, but are recruiting for a number of those roles at the moment.
Thanks, Gavin. Thank you for that. Any other questions? Hilary and Gretchen.
Thanks, Andrew. Following on from Carmen's question, this is a really complex area, and thanks to staff for the way they've presented it. In some respects, it's allowed us to understand that it's quite complex and quite urgent, and there's all sorts of things involved. I'm thinking workshop-wise, is there any opportunity in this program or in these interactions to have any workshops that aren't the standard staff sharing of information and us asking questions, but have an interaction such as that we would, like divide into groups of 3 or 4 and look at a topic and then come back with some suggestions to the main group as to which of the things were useful, so as that staff could send us in advance the areas that were the issues and what the issues were and what was going on, and we could actually interact with them and have we've sometimes had people coming in and facilitating things. I don't think we necessarily need that. I just think that some of these topics might respond well to some interactive with us dividing into little groups and things. I see Carmen nodding her head. Anyway, are there any of these issues that would be able to be dealt with rather than just a sharing of staff information and questions? I'd find it really helpful.
Yep, there are many ways we could design the workshop, and I'll just take that as feedback in terms of how we might run it.
Thank you.
Okay, Gretchen?
Just at the time of the LTP, we had a discussion as a council around the need to move from understanding problems in catchments to doing action. And I think staff were going to try and devise a way of prioritising areas based on a whole range of factors that would come out with some sort of way for us to prioritise actions across Otago. So that would involve things like, in my mind at least, are there other projects going on in those catchments that we could lever off, like, for example, the at-risk catchments, but there's others, obviously, in Otago, like the Tairi, the Pomahaka, Waiwanaka, all sorts of other ones that are similar, actually, to the Manuhira Kia that have projects going on. And then you would categorise which ones have got different categories of risk, I suppose. So I'm wondering whether assessing Manuhira Kia at this point on its own is as helpful as looking across Otago, and whether we've got any work that's gone on or not to help with that if we were going to discuss this further or have a workshop.
So just 2 things, and maybe Gavin or Sarah want to add on to that. The first one was, this was a specific request from the FMU leads on the Manuhira Kia. I can't remember the month. They asked us to come back and present a paper about supporting initiatives that we might do in conjunction with the regulatory regime. So it's been a response from a request from councillors. In terms of how we might look at a Manuhira Kia and compare it to other catchments, work has been done. There is a prioritisation process that's been developed. I think Sarah or Gavin might talk to where we're at in terms of coming back with, in terms of the targeted response plans, I think, that were being developed. I think there's something due coming.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Howard's in the meeting at the moment, Manager of Environmental Implementation. She can add a bit more detail around that if you like.
Thanks.
Morena, thank you through the chair. So yes, the strategy team have developed the initial prioritisation framework, and over the next couple of weeks I have a new principal advisor that starts on Monday and is familiar with the internal workings, so we'll be using that framework to come up with a list of potential areas for targeted action plans.
Thanks, Andrew.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you, because it just it raises in my mind. Although Manuhira Care is really fantastic and would be great to leave her off, it'd be really interesting to see what else ORC might be looking at doing.
Okay, thank you. Kevin and then Michael Laws.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Robertson, for bringing that up, because whatever we do in one particular area would be great that we could actually roll it over to other areas and use from those learnings. So that's pretty special. But just looking at your strategic framework and policy considerations, 25 and 26, Ms. Elsom, it actually, one part that we often forget about is water quality. I mean, that's the key driver of all of this. And I see that by passing, going with our recommendations at the start, all that good work that we're actually trying to get done around education in relation to water, catchment group facilitation, riparian works, even water transportation efficiencies, and possibly land use change can still be done. Can be still, the only thing we're actually missing, which you alluded to when Councillor Forbes asked her questions, was we actually haven't got a quantum for storage and the like. So all that other good work on water quality can actually continue. Do you see it that way? I better make a question. Sorry.
Sorry, Councillor Malcolm. I just had a text from Ms. Elsom to say that her internet's cut out.
Happy to listen to you, Mrs. Gardner. No problem.
I'm not sure I'm going to answer the question the right way, but I think here she is. She hasn't heard the question. So, you know, how much you do in a catchment is influenced by a number of things. Water quality, of course, is influenced by flow. That is one of the challenges of not having a flow noted, is that you don't necessarily have the full picture of what the bottom lines would be in terms of how much you might invest. So yes, you could do some work, and I think that's what Gwyneth is saying. It's just that if you had flow, then, you know, if you knew what flow was going to look like, then potentially you would be able to be more accurate about the inputs and what it would take.
Yes, but as we alluded from yesterday, I suppose that we have, once the science is back and signed off and that flow established, that's just the next step of it. It shouldn't stop us doing that good work, you know, the initial part of that good work to get things even spread out right through the whole province. I just see there's so many, wherever we start this process of, say, riparian planting works, and scoping out what that could be in any particular area, I think that will go through, be no different to going up to the Kakanui or down to the Waipahi, which we don't go down to the Waipahi, but you know, I just think it will be reflected everywhere. I wouldn't like you to not do it. Actually, I think it's important.
That was you did manage to get a question in there, Kevin. I noted.
Thank
Michael,
you. Sorry,
Michael Laws.
I just want to clarify, please. So whatever we decide to do, and this is us as an entity, the ORC, in terms of support, that will go into the next annual plan. Is that correct? But, and so that's the sort of first part of the question, semicolon. But the money that's coming from the government, that $12 million, we can access that now? Question mark.
Yeah, so as Gavin and I both alluded to, there's not, apart from BAU, there's no additional work for the Manuhira Care in terms of non-regulars in current budget. So yes, that's what we're asking permission for, basically, or direction on, is to go away and build it up so that we can come back as part of the annual planning process with that work. In terms of the MFE budget, as I understand it, that $12 million is just allocated to the program. It's not to catchments specifically. You can do the maths. There's only 3 catchments that have been announced to date, but that doesn't mean it's equally divided, and that, as I alluded to before, you might want to get your projects up and running while the pot of money is still there.
Thanks, Gwyneth. Okay. Someone like to move if there's no more questions. I assume there's no more questions. You're moving, Kate, seconded Carmen?
No, just a slight amendment, because I think we haven't got the proposed, so I've just put those in chat, and I was asking staff. I was just about to send Sarah a check, and I didn't. Gwyneth's been too busy to look at it. Answer questions. Right. Yeah.
All right. I'm going to move
Adding will before complement.
Just talk us through this, Kate.
The split screens is difficult. So we note the report. We note that staff will communicate to the Manihera Care community ORC's intention to support initiatives in the Manihera Care FMU that will complement the regulatory water management regime, take out being proposed for, and replace with the word in the new land and water plan.
Just Kate, that might imply that we're putting initiatives to support the current regulatory water management regime, which changes the scope of the initiatives, that's all.
Yep. I'm sorry, I wasn't thinking it was. It doesn't say what they are. I think anyone in the space will know that we're still considering that. But I appreciate what you said earlier about that wording isn't quite right, but we need to go forward. Well, do you want to just go up to support initiatives in the Manihera Care FMU and delete the rest? In the meantime.
So you're suggesting stop the sentence after FMU.
Yes.
You've also got a piece in the chat from Councillor Robertson.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. I was just thinking that it might be its own point, or it could be on 4 around workshopping, that we come back based on what Gwyneth said, that we're quite close to a prioritisation for catchments across Otago, that we also deliberately say at this point that we're going to look at the wider context as well. I'm happy with the recommendations, but yeah, I'm thinking that we might as well capitalise on that. Councillor Malcolm, you said so too, and add that we're going to look at an approach for all catchments in Otago.
I'm really happy to put that in here. They are subject to others already existing motions of council through strategy and planning. I think we've got those already. We can reiterate them here. I'm comfortable either way.
So both Kate and Carmen, Kate indicated that you're going to move the recommendations, whether they're modified or not, but we just need to understand exactly what they are, and if they are modified, what we're actually what's being moved and seconded.
Oh, yeah, sure.
I'm happy to adjourn, so 3 or 4 of us. I just think staff need time to check that they're right. If they're happy that it's 1, 2 down to the word FMU and full stop, 3 it stays the same, 4 notes it would be further workshops with councillors to clarify expectations on the potential role for ORC in supporting and or delivering land use change, water transportation, efficiency and storage initiatives on and off farm in all catchments.
For me, it's not just the efficiency and infrastructure, it's all approaches. Yep.
What? Yeah. So, and all approaches over all catchments.
Yeah.
Thank you, Diane.
Okay. Are you happy to second those, the recommendations as amended, Carmen?
Thank you, Andrew.
You're quick, Diane. Very hard to.
I think we could probably, if we just give Di a couple of
Minutes.
a minute or two. If you need longer, Di, just sing out and we will adjourn.
Oops.
Wow, that was quick.
All right.
So, no, Diane, you're doing well. So on the second one, we take out all of the words after FMU.
Right.
Great.
And
And 4, I think, after the brackets, and that's what, Gretchen, you wanted to add the words there, all initiatives, did you? No, we keep those words there.
Yeah.
yeah,
But we, after the brackets, we add, and any other initiatives.
Yep. That, something like that. Yep.
Who seems very woolly to me now. Notes that staff will communicate to the Manahera Care Community ORC's intention to support initiatives. Manahera Care, FMU. So what sort of initiatives? It doesn't, seems initiatives
well,
towards something.
I think 3 gives that
Yeah.
intention.
Yeah.
Where's there?
Perhaps if you
And
feel
direct.
3 does, could you say initiatives noted in 3 below?
3. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
oops. Sorry, Pia.
Thank you. Thanks, Di.
Noted in 3.
It's not perfect, but I think it gives a very good starting point that we can, I'm sure
Okay,
staff
my
will work with.
suggestion was initiatives, after initiatives in 2, support initiatives noted in
3.
3 below. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Just in terms of 4, sorry, just in terms of 4 and the workshops now. So your expectation that we come back for workshops on the items in 3 before we go to stakeholders and community? Just it's the wording now says and all other initiatives.
I would expect that.
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, I do too. Yeah.
Good thinking, Gwyneth.
Sorry, was I changing something there?
No, I'm just getting clarification what all initiatives means in, I think, sorry, I've taken out the wording, but in 4, it just talks about and all other initiatives.
Would you rather we specifically pointed to whatever the prioritisation thing that's happening is called?
Probably. Well, it just, I mean, it's a bit vague in terms of all other initiatives. So what workshops are we having? So I was clear about land use, water and those things. If you want the workshop to be on the prioritisation, we can do one on that as well. But if you want us to do all initiatives, then you need to just be clear about what, because there's a lot of work happening in America here.
No, it's all 6. So it's capacity building, catchment, riparian works, land use, transport, efficiency and storage. It's all those things, and it's about your prioritisation structure you're developing, just so that we can be clear across the Otago whether we're going to invest heavily, we're going to do moderate because it's spread right across the Otago, or we're going to target specific catchments like the Manuhira Care, or actually we're facing water quality issues in, say, 8 catchments. We're going to have to spread it, whatever. So it's all of those approaches, and it's your prioritisation thing. So it's looking at the prioritisation, and it's looking at all of those 6 factors. I don't know if we need to mention prioritisation in the motion.
Is that clear? Is that clear enough, Gwyneth?
Yes.
Okay. Gretchen, you've still got your hand up. You may have, or you're all set. Okay. Kevin?
Yeah, look, I think further to what Councillor Robertson's saying, I think a lot of that will be just your business as usual. what you've actually got planned in those areas will most likely suffice for 95% of what we're actually doing. And as Councillor Robertson said, we may just need to target some specific hotspots or whatever. So I think a lot of that stuff will be just business as usual, and us just really understanding what the approach is.
Public clarity. Yep.
Thank you.
So we're all set. So it's been moved and seconded and modified. I wondered, Di, are you able to put the modified recommendations up on the screen? Thank you. So it's been moved by Kate, seconded by Carmen. I'll put are you happy that I put the 5 recommendations all as one? I will put all 5 recommendations. Raise your hand if you're in favour. Unfortunately, I can't see anybody right at the moment. I think we'll just do please say aye if you support the 5 recommendations.
Aye.
Aye.
I support all of them except number 2.
Do you want that noted or not?
Yeah, I think so. Thanks.
So okay. So I've put them all.
Sorry, I've been trying to get through. I've had my hand up since the beginning and you haven't called me.
Well, Marion, I haven't noticed you up until now. So okay, well, let's just take a step back just for a moment. What I said was I was going to put all the recommendations together. I'm not sure whether everyone heard that. And then Michael Laws has said that he doesn't support recommendation 2. So I'll step back and I'll put them individually. But before I do that, Marion, I didn't see your hand. I now see your hand. Would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, I would.
Okay.
Yes, I would. I'm sorry, I put my hand up as soon as you seemed to move from amendments to putting the motion. At that time, I put my hand up. And then because I was obedient, because that's what one of the councillors asked me to take off my sound, you couldn't hear me and you couldn't see me waving like this. I just want to say that sadly, I'm going to oppose the whole lot. The heading of this paper is non-regulatory support for initiatives for Manuherikia FMU. And now in the amendments, and quite rightly, I actually agree with the substance in the sense of this is not just for the FMU, but it's for everyone. We're extending it to everybody. The reasons why I oppose it, I'm perfectly happy to continue with existing work in the catchment, but no special work related to change as in the land and water plan, because we have not indicated what that change might be. And we've already had our staff working God knows how many hours, 26,000 hours, to present a plan which yesterday we ignored and put into another basket. I just want to give you an example. Lake Taupo got 80 million from the government, 40 million from the regional council, 20 million from its local council, and it only got that money from government because they were all in agreement to reduce stock units on plan on their farms on the western side to preserve water quality. I contrast that with the Manuherikia. The regional council can't even note a future for the Manuherikia. It's put it on delay. The CODC, the local council, wants us to wait to preserve the galactids and the farmers. The iwi are dismayed with the direction and delay of councils. Whereas I had Tū Wharetua, central government, Taupo District Council and Environment Waikato all in the basket before I went asking for money. So I'm saying, please don't raise expectations of one particular community, a community who's already had 30 years grace to conform to the RMA and consents, until the farming community and its representatives on this council give clear direction. Then please do not add work to our staff. yes, business as usual. And yes, some other plans that we have around biodiversity. But we've just rejected 26,000 hours of work. And now you're asking staff to do more work on something vague. You're so vague that you say you want a report from the TAG. The members of the TAG are leaving by the minute. We're probably going to be left with the irrigators being the only members of the TAG. Thank you.
Thank you, Marion. Look, I'm going to put each individual motion one by one, and then I'll just ask people to verbally vote. So I'll put recommendation 1 that council notes this report. Please say aye.
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 Against?
No.
Carried. Recommendation 2 that
Aye.
council. Hang on. I'm just going to read the whole thing. Notes that staff will communicate to the Manuheri Care Community ORC's intention to support initiatives noted in 3 below in the Manuheri Care FMU. Please say aye.
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 Against?
No.
Carried.
Division.
Okay, division. Thank you, Di.
Oops.
Right. Councillor Calvert,
Aye.
Councillor Deaker,
Aye.
Councillor Forbes,
No.
Councillor Hobbs,
No.
Councillor Hope,
Yes.
Councillor Laws,
No.
Councillor Callagher. Oh, he'll be sitting out.
It's not on here.
Okay, sorry. Councillor.
He is on here, but he's not voting.
No, he's sitting out. Councillor Malcolm,
Aye.
Councillor Noon,
Aye.
Councillor Robertson,
Aye.
Councillor Scott South, Councillor Wilson.
Aye.
7 for and 3 against.
Motion carried. For the need of efficiency, I'll just move. I'll just ask for or put recommendation 3 or motion number 3. Support. Please say aye if you support that.
Aye.
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 Against?
No.
Motion carried. Recommendation 4. I'll put that. Please say aye in support.
Aye.
Aye.
Against?
No.
What I can hear is 2 voices saying no, so motion carried. I'll put recommendation 5. Please say aye.
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 Against?
No.
No.
So once again, two no's. Motion carried. Thank you, everybody. Just give Di a moment to. Yep. Thank you. So moving
Thanks,
on
staff.
to. Thank you all. Thank you, Gwyneth, and the rest of the team, Anita, Andrea, etc. Item number 7.3 update on the interpretation of the RPS as a freshwater instrument. It's the legal challenge that we've got on the go at the moment. Anita, are you wanting? You're the one to update us where things are at in terms of communication with Forest and Bird and the Environmental Defence Society or agency.
Sure, yes. So through you, Chair, some of you were at the very long workshop day right till the end when we had a discussion about this, but some of you had left, so we thought we should bring a paper so that everyone's aware that we have joined the proceedings. EDS have actually pulled out, so it's Forest and Bird and ORC. We are just in the process of developing a statement of claim with Forest and Bird And the question is, and it's a conversation we had when we brought the RPSU in June about whether or not it is a freshwater instrument in its entirety. So I mean, I hope the paper stands for itself, but happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Thank you. Any queries, questions for Anita?
Happy to move when suits.
Okay, there are no. Oh, Carmen? No. Okay, moved by Kate, seconded by Carmen.
Carmen.
Any discussion? This is the as set out in the audit paper, that we note the report and we note that ORC has joined the declaration proceedings with respect to whether the proposed regional policy statement 2021 is a freshwater instrument in its entirety.
Andrew.
Kevin, are you speaking to the motions?
No, I just wanted to. Am I speaking to the motion? Am I speaking to the motion? Yes, I will, I suppose. Yep. I really had a question to staff, Andrew. If I'm too late, I'm too late.
Ask your question.
Look, I just this process. I understand exactly what staff's doing, and clearly that is the line to go down. So no problem with that. But I just wonder why are we just not directing Forest and Bird to the Ministry of the Environment to say we're actually following process. We're actually following ministry, or the process of our plan. Please get a hold of the ministry to confirm that we're right.
So through you, Chair, the mechanism that Forest and Bird are taking is perfectly lawful. We have had discussions with the ministry. We're having ongoing discussions with the ministry because we feel that this might not be an ORC problem alone. And it might replicate itself a few more times up and down the country as we test out this process. We are very much continuing on because we think that the position we've taken is the right one. But it's also really important that we're part of the High Court challenge, because we want to be able to control the narrative in terms of putting ORC's position rather than just defending. So I hear the frustration, Councillor Malcolm. It's one that I share, but there's very little we can do about it other than try to control how the High Court, the statement of claim, is put together, and that's the intent of us being there.
Yeah. Thanks very much, and we appreciate that. Thank you.
We'll see it. No more questions. I'll put those two motions. If you just raise your hand, all those in favour, raise their hand. Against? Both motions are carried. Thank you. We're due for an adjournment in about 2 or 3 minutes' time. I think we've got time to deal with 7.4. This is the ORC appointment to Cozy Homes Trust.
Happy to move.
Happy to move. Moved by Kate, seconded by Carmen. Just before I put the motion, that you may have been aware that I was interviewed by TV1 a week or two ago, and a bit of a beat up in terms of the inference that Otago Regional Council aren't doing anything in terms of improving air quality throughout Otago where the hotspots are. And I think it's important to remember that it's business as usual in terms of monitoring and compliance and education. And it's also important to remember that over the next, although nothing's happening this particular year, but over the next preceding year, 18 months, we will review our air plan. We'll develop a air strategy and an implementation plan. And if people are asking, refer them to our long-term plan, which shows significant increases in financial support to help I suppose the worst affected towns throughout Otago when it comes to poor air quality. So we are working towards a considerable investment in that area. So yeah, just wanted to share that with you. Any further discussion? If not, I'll put those 3 recommendations all as one. So if you just raise your hand, all in favour.
I've got my hand up for a question.
Oh, sorry, I didn't spot it. Sorry, Kevin.
just on page 54, on the background, we have the mission of making every home in Dunedin warm and cosy. Their mission is actually every home in Otago. I think that's probably quite critical if we're putting in, if we're going into something that should be for the good of Otago, and the Cozy Homes mission is every first paragraph 4 it is the mission making every home in Otago warm and cozy by 2025.
If the motions are passed, it's something I can raise as a trustee, if that's okay.
Just for background, Kevin, we are one of the founding trustees. So ORC, I guess, is part of that documentation, and we just need to appoint a trustee into the position. So once there is a person to replace the previous one, they can have those discussions. I know that they've been having discussions around their strategy. I'm not sure where they're at with that, given there was a bit of a change in personnel and the trust on the board. So I'm sure Andrew can take through.
Can I ask?
Yeah, but actually it's on their website that it is Otago, not just Dunedin.
Yeah.
So yep. Thank you.
Question from Michael Laws.
If you're a trustee, Andrew, does that mean you have to declare an interest if we were to fund them, and that you therefore can't participate in the debate or vote?
I would have thought that the interest would be as like the well, no, I won't say that. I was going to say like the general public, and then I think, well, I'm probably in a privileged position in terms of being an elected member and a trustee. So if there was in the future a direct funding coming from the ORC to the trust, yes, I would have to sit back. Sorry, just had to think about it.
Okay, thank you.
Marion.
I'm sorry, I just lowered my hand because the equivalent thing was predator free. I was chair of predator free, and as soon as I became chair of ORC, I had to withdraw from there.
Yep. Yeah, no, fair enough. Thank you. Brian.
Yeah, I was just following up from Kevin's comment. I think Kevin's point was that the trust is for all of Otago, and your response, Mr. Chair, was to bring it up with the trust. I think it's the report that's got a mistake, I think, not the trust.
I think the report was written a while ago, and they've done some work on their strategy, and I think they might have updated their mission. So we'll just, we can note that it's for all of Otago rather than just Dunedin.
Thanks for the clarification, Brian. So I'll put those 3 motions. Just raise your hand. All those in favour, raise your hand. Against? Carried. Okay, so let's adjourn for 15 minutes, reconvene at 17 minutes past 10. Thank you all. Okay, welcome back, everybody. It's now 17 minutes past 10, so we've reconvened. Moving through the agenda, we're now on item 7.5. This is the ORC submission on freshwater farm regulations. And this report requests the council delegate authority to the chair to approve the submission from the ORC on the Minister for the Environment freshwater farm plan regulations discussion document. In other words, the discussion document. And we were just advised from Richard this morning, Richard Saunders, there's been a 2-week extension for those submissions. So I assume, I'm not sure whether Richard's with us, but I assume that means the cutoff date is now the 26th of September.
Yep. Richard, do you want to speak to it? Or?
Yeah, that's right, Andrew. So it's a 2-week extension due to COVID, and the good thing is that should mean that there'll be an overlap with the proposed changes to the intensive winter grazing regulations that will come out. We're expecting them later this week, either today or tomorrow. So we can include that in the workshop as well, and council can decide whether they'd like to submit on those changes. So we'll wrap it all into one.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So the recommendation number 2 just needs to be tweaked to include the updated date, which becomes the 26th of September by the time that the submissions need to be lodged by.
Also, it'd be good to maybe, or just replicate 2 again and just note the winter grazing as well.
Okay.
So if we take recommendation 2, I don't know if Warren, if you want to, we haven't really talked about this behind the scenes stuff. Take recommendation 2, repeat it, and then put the winter grazing, so that we have delegation to also
cover that off.
Cover the submission to the winter grazing as well, and we will put a workshop. We'll include the winter grazing, as Richard said, in the workshop.
Welcome, Warren. Did you want to make any comment?
Morning. No, thanks. That's covered everything for this one, which was really the update to the date and the winter grazing. So
yep. Okay. So Di, you've got that covered off in terms of the 2 tweaks to the recommendation 2. So we include winter grazing, probably after the discussion document, I suppose. It covers off freshwater farm plans and stock exclusion regulations, including updated winter grazing regulations. Thank you, Kate. And then obviously the change in the date to the 26th of September. Any questions?
I've got that.
Thanks, Di. Kate.
I'm just unclear because it may be that we don't need to submit, and I don't know because I haven't seen them. But is this a staff submission or a total council submission? Because it does have a slight nuance to it.
Council.
Yeah.
So as I understand it from Richard, might be able to fill in. So staff are putting in towards a sector-wide submission. Okay. So staff's voice would be heard through that.
That's right. Okay. So there's a regional sector submission that's being worked on by a number of staff involved in the broader farm plan process. So we've inputted into that. So this would be, you're absolutely right, Kate. There's a decision to be made whether you want to submit would be the first question. And then if you do, then there's obviously just seeks delegation for Andrew to approve that based on the content you raise at the workshop. just so we can meet the timeframes.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with it. I should have probably as necessary, but yeah, I'm comfortable and happy to move whenever it suits.
Thank you. Hillary.
Just seeing that it reflects the issues identified in a workshop. The issues that come from a workshop are usually the issues that the staff put into the workshop. So is it expected that it would be the issues that have been identified by the report that comes to the workshop, or would it be the issues that any additional issues that may be raised by anybody at a workshop? I'm just trying to get, is it the sort of workshop where we're told stuff and then there's questions, or is it the sort of workshop where we could raise further issues?
So maybe I'll talk to briefly about how I intended the workshop to run, and then Warren can cover off how the submission content might be picked up. So all I'll be doing is talking through the content of the discussion document to explain what MFE's proposal is and the questions they're asking. I won't be sharing my opinions on it. Really, we're after your feedback on that discussion document and any issues you can see in what's proposed, and that would form the content of the submission.
Okay, thank you. Michael Decker.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. I'm maybe in a cloud about this issue, but some questions for Richard and/or Warren and/or Gwyneth. One, have we seen or have we been sent a draft of this proposed document? Has the staff actually drafted a submission or any discussion points on it? Or are we starting with a completely blank page?
Richard, Gwyneth.
So we know we haven't drafted a submission. The purpose of the workshop is for councillors to identify points you may wish to submit on. And I suppose that goes back to Kate's question or Kate's comment that once you've had a read of it, and it has been circulated, councillor, but I'm happy to recirculate it if that's helpful. And I'll also make sure I send out the link for the winter grazing regulations once they're up on the MFE site. So that I guess going back to the purpose of this workshop is to identify whether there are any points you would like to submit on as councillors.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Brian.
Yeah, apologies. When's this workshop going to be?
So I'll work with Di and Liz to get it in the calendar, but I'm hoping we can fit it around the regulatory committee meeting in a couple of weeks.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we all sorted with questions? Yep. Someone like to move the two recommendations with those two amendments in recommendation 2? Moved by Carmen, seconded by Kate. Any discussion? If not, just raise your hand if you support both motions. Both motions carried. Thank you. Moving on to the paper 7.6. This is the ORC submission on the future of Forbury Park. This is the report to request approval to lodge the ORC submission with the Harness Racing New Zealand on the future of Forbury Park. We've got the report plus the summary info attached to it. So this is Warren again, and also Gavin, and the two report. I didn't actually see the council meeting attached to my agenda, but maybe that's just me. I didn't see it. I just went back onto the diligent and found that those recommendations that we passed on the 27th of May. Anyway, questions for Gavin or Warren? John Luke is with us as well. Gavin, is there anything you want to say at the front end? You obviously indicate with the report that the RPS is sort of sets a framework to sort of provide a degree of direction around greenfields, residential or development, full stop. And you've posted in the paper that we give consideration about that sort of that higher level approach versus a more drilled down case by case approach. You want feedback on either of those approaches. Is that the correct understanding?
Well, Mr. Chairman, Council has already adopted a position on Forbury Park in the decision it made at the May Council meeting. So the submission simply restates that position.
Okay, it's cool. Any questions for either Gavin, Warren or John Luke? No, everyone's comfortable?
Happy to move.
Moved by Kate, second by Gretchen. Any discussion? Brian, then Marion.
Yeah, discussion. Thank you. It looked as if you were going to jump straight into. I just want to make a couple of points, and I agree with Dr. Palmer. We've already been through this, but this is important. And key aspects to the submission are that careful consideration of natural hazards is required. We seek to ensure that levels of risk from natural hazards do not exceed a tolerable level. We're adopting a precautionary approach, and we're asking the examination of opportunities to use the site to mitigate flood hazard for the wider South Dunedin area. This is a significant issue in South Dunedin, and I certainly support the submission. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Marion? Have to unmute, Marion.
Right, I support the submission. Thank you. I support the submission. I particularly like that part which it's on page 73 of the agenda, which talks to the application to the Forbury Park site, because it says that future developments of the site require very careful consideration of national hazards and to take into account the likely changes to the physical environment, including the effects on groundwater for the long term, 100 years. So this is a really good precautionary approach. It's just saying you can do it, okay? You can do changes, but you really have to take care, and we will have to take care in consenting this. And I really appreciate that, because it's not only the effect on Forbury Park, but if you do something on Forbury Park that might affect other parts of South Dunedin, the neighbouring areas around it. But it's not saying that you can't have a clever response that actually looks after both. Thank you. I appreciate the report.
Thanks, Marion. Any further discussion? If not, I'll put those two recommendations. I think Kate moved it and Gretchen seconded, I believe. Yep. So I'll put the two recommendations together. Just raise your hand if you're in favour of both. Against? Carried. Thank you. Thanks to all the staff involved there.
Thank you.
Moving on to 7.7. This is the Eco Fund review. In a moment, I'll go to Evan and then to Michael Decker. I assume, is Evan with us?
Ewan.
Oh, sorry. Ewan, beg your pardon.
Through the chair, no, I'm presenting this paper.
Oh, Andrea, sorry, we're in your hands.
Do you want me to say?
I think, Mr. Chairman, we might just take it as read.
Okay, thank you. Very good. Michael Decker.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew, and thanks, Andrea and Gavin and Ewan, for all the work in this, I think, very comprehensive paper. It's a good one, it's timely. I'm happy to move all the recommendations in the paper, but in doing so, and somebody might want to second it, but I've got a couple of questions as well, which I'll barrel into straight away. They refer to clauses 11 and 12 in the paper, where we're given a clear indication that other incentive programs are being planned of a range of biodiversity schemes. And that brought to the question in my mind of whether this review of the Eco Fund, in conjunction with all these other new incentive programs being planned, will actually look at the quantum of the Eco Fund. Is that part of this review? Because that's not spelled out in the paper. It may be intended, but it's not there. Or if it is there, I've missed it. So I wonder if Andrea could comment on that. Where does the Eco Fund fit in along with these other proposed incentive programs, which I'm guessing are all annual plan propositions? And what will the review do about the quantum of the Eco Fund? Will it stay at 250,000 or 300,000, or what are the ideas there?
Thank you. Through the chair. So we have Eco Fund funding ring-fenced, and that has increased as a result of the annual long-term plan. We also have some pockets of money for achieving objectives that are not too dissimilar from those of the Eco Fund. So we just want to take the time to consider how we align and coordinate those, and what approach we want to take, basically. So that one potential outcome could be that the Eco Fund encompasses all of those other incentives, or we separate that out and continue to operate it as a specific fund, and that's supplemented by other initiatives.
Yeah, that you've touched on a thing that was on my mind too, about the possibility of developing just one major fund which could incorporate all those incentive programs that you're thinking about. But I, for one, would not like that idea very much. I think the Eco Fund has a sort of a niche position, particularly for the small community projects, you know, the $5,000 jobs or less, which it's, I think, proven itself to be very valuable for that, in that realm of community activity. Whereas the other ones that you seem to be thinking about, or that Ewan's got in mind for his biodiversity work, I'm imagining would be more sort of Pan Otago, bigger scale stuff.
Through the chair, yes, there's a mixture of both. I think that's why we need to basically determine the overall strategy, what we're trying to achieve, and then work backwards in terms of the mechanisms to achieve that. So there's definitely no decisions have been made, and the Eco Fund is well known as a brand, and in terms of people's understanding about what it's trying to achieve and how they contribute to that. So but yeah, we just want to make sure that the other funding complements, I guess, the existing Eco Fund.
Yeah, well said, Andrew. Andrew, that's me. I've moved. I'm very happy to see whether it's got a seconder.
Yeah, Carmen has seconded it. I'm going to Brian. A question or speaking to the motion, Brian?
A question.
Good.
In terms of the scope of the review, what are we doing in terms of the review to get some confidence that we're getting long-term environmental gains? Like, we're spending a significant amount of money, we're now spending a certain amount of time. Could we have some type of bullet point in there to maybe some type of assessment, some type of comparison of what was promised and what's ultimately achieved? So, for example, if a group says they're going to plant 100 plants, you know, are they still alive after 5 years or whatever? At some point, it seems to me, from a governance perspective, we need to have some confidence that we're making some inroads. It's a question.
So yes, through the chair, definitely we want to ensure that our investment is wise and is delivering the benefits, particularly that have been
Unfortunately, Andrea is...
Maybe, Mr. Chair, I can just finish the answer, which is yes, it's not so much a review of whether there should be a fund, but I would say to answer the questions in paragraph 12, we will need to comment on the effectiveness to date of the fund.
Perfect.
Especially in light of the how it fits with those other incentives that Ms. Howard referred to.
Yep. Cool. Thank you.
A question from Alexa and then Carmen.
Would that include, it's just a clarification on there, Gavin, would that include going back to the start of the Eco Fund and having a look at an analysis of where they all are, where they've got to?
Yes, through the Chair, I think it would have to. I think we'd need to look at it in toto right from the start and provide some sort of comment on the outcomes and whether they have fulfilled the intent of the fund.
Impact.
That's really good.
What's the
That's
impact
good,
of it? Yeah. Thank you.
Carmen?
Councillor Forbes has actually asked my question. I think that's a really great thing. And I echo Councillor Deaker's sentiments that we should keep it how it is, you know, because I think it's a bit like Jimmy's Pies, or it's a bit like, I don't know, the yellow-eyed penguins. It's world famous here in Otago. It's got a great name and I wouldn't like to see it changed. So well done, Councillor Deaker, on your suggestion.
Cool. Kevin?
Yeah, just endorsing Councillor Deaker's comments really, and also Councillor Hope, that the fund is going, and I'm probably speaking to the motion really, is that okay? Are we
Please.
at that stage?
Great. Yes.
Yeah. Look, I think it is a fund, certainly is growing. The only thing I would say on people reporting back is that we need to tailor that to somehow to the size of the monies that we're giving out. If we're giving out 1,000 or 2,000, well, perhaps we need minimal response back from the people, but when we're getting into the 20, 30s and 40,000s, they need to be reporting back pretty good. But we need to scope a way of making sure we are getting the desired outcomes. I spent 2.5 hours last week in an Avira Schools teacher day for Sawyer Undies, and look, I think we all need to see how they saw their undies. I think it's a tremendous concept. It's getting great buy-in. This was schools from Waikawa Iti right through to Otamatata, held at Waitaki Boys. The teachers were just completely involved in the learning process of Sawyer Undies and how great effect it was having on the kids that were involved, how it was becoming a great learning tool for kids with possible learning difficulties that they were struggling to get involved in other things. But this concept was really hitting the nail on the head. And look, if we can continue to support initiatives like that through this fund, I think we're doing a tremendous job, and the benefits are long-standing, I'm sure. So thanks, Chair.
Gary?
Thanks, Andrew. Look, total supporter of the Eco Fund, and I think it's doing some great stuff across Otago. I'm just a wee bit concerned about what we might be looking back at. And just because we hand out money to projects, it doesn't automatically mean they are going to be super success stories, and we should be demanding a level of success to be reported to us based around each of these projects, because I'd hate to see a situation where maybe some plantings failed, or maybe another situation didn't quite work as well as was planned, and it then influenced what we might fund into the future. So I think we just need to be a little bit careful, but certainly support the recommendations of the report, the scope of the review, and also the proposed redistribution. Thank you.
Okay. Any further speakers to the motions?
I see Andrea has unfrozen again. She might want to finish off what she was saying before.
I don't know if I remember what I was saying before. I'm sure it was complete, and Gavin would have taken over very ably.
Awesome. No further discussion? If not, we'll put those 4 recommendations all as one. If you just raise your hand, if you're in support of the 4 recommendations. Against? Motion carried. Thank you very much, Andrea, Ewan, Gavin. Moving on to item 7.8, this is the proposal to join the local government funding agency. I assume Nick is with us, and maybe Miles O'Connor from Bancorp, maybe. Nick, we're in your hands anyway.
Yeah, thanks. Miles, I think, is just getting let in. So we've got Miles O'Connor from Bancorp here in case there's any sort of more technical questions. But just looking at this paper is fairly procedural. If you remember, we've been through quite a process around the LGFA. And last time we came to council, council approved in principle council joining the LGFA and approved the proposal for us to go out and consult on joining, which was a requirement under the LGFA because of the nature of the borrowing involves borrower notes, which can convert to equity. So we've been through that consultation process. Council had delegated overseeing that and undertaking hearings to the co-chairs of finance. So out of the consultation process, there was only 2 submissions. Neither of them actually touched on the substantial issue that we were consulting on, which was the issue around the borrower notes. But one was basically, they were both just tick box, that one said yes, endorsed us joining, and one said no, they didn't. But neither really offered anything more than that. So neither wished to be heard, so we didn't have to conduct hearings. And as such, I met with the co-chairs of finance to discuss that, and they agreed that we'd prepare this paper and put forward the recommendation to join the LGFA. So this paper then is doing that, recommending that council proceeds with joining the LGFA. Notes some of the things that we're intending to do around appointing the trustee and the registrar. And then what we're proposing is that rather than us coming back to council with all the documents, because there is a lot, we've listed broadly what they are, that we've recommended that council authorises and delegates the co-chairs of finance and the CE to execute the various documents that are necessary. So assuming that council's comfortable with that, we've then got our legal advisors preparing that, dealing with the LGFA. When those documents are complete, and hopefully we're out of lockdown, we'll be able to get the co-chairs of finance and go through those documents and execute them where necessary, together with the CE, as some of the documents don't actually require councillors to sign, but some do, and so the ones that don't, the CE will execute those. So in a nutshell, that's where we're at. It's probably actually fairly procedural, although it seems like there's a bit more to it, but it's relatively straightforward.
Thanks, Nick. I've got Hilary, and then I'll check with Kevin and then go to Gary.
Just happy to move these recommendations.
Thank you. With a seconder. Seconded by Gary. So any further questions before we go to
Sir, yes,
debate? Michael Laws.
Thank you. 2 questions. What is the total debt that the LGFA services, please, Nick? So the total debt, because remember, we're going to be guaranteeing it. And the second question is, have you thought about the water reforms? Most of that debt, I imagine, would have been created for water infrastructure. And I'm interested in what happens to that debt under the government's proposed water reforms.
Okay. I think
Nick, can you hear me?
Miles is probably best to answer the first question about the total debt. And then I think actually Mrs. Gardner is probably best to answer the question about what will happen, because she's more involved in Three Waters and what's proposed there around where the debt goes with that, because that is one of the big questions around Three Waters, is how that all works. But Miles, you can probably answer the first question.
So can you hear me?
Yep, welcome, Miles.
Thank you. So you can hear me all right? Sorry.
Yes.
Right. Hi, Michael. I think we met last year or the year before when I was down presenting. The LGFA has about 13 billion of debt at the moment. And of that, so 13 billion, they actually have about 1.5 billion, what's called pre-funded. So there's just a form of liquidity. Now, Otago Regional Council's share of the guarantee, it's in one of the papers, Nick. I'm just trying to remember what the number was. It's in relation to the rating base. I think, just off the top of my head, I'd have to go through some documents, but I've got a feeling it's about 0.41%. So it's totally in relation to your size. It's not equal. You know, you're not sharing it with Auckland or anyone.
So it's 0.41 of the 13 billion.
Well, yeah. Well, your share, if there was a default, your share would be that percentage. I can't guarantee it.
Oh, I get it. So if Auckland defaulted, it would be that percentage.
Yeah, so I mean, well, whoever defaulted, I mean, if it was, if there was so I'm just working it out. 410,000 of a $100 million default.
Thanks.
But it might be 0.47 or 0.48. Have you got the document there, Nick? The one that we sent? It was because there've been so many of them.
No, I'm just trying to see if I can go back to the previous previous paper. I'll see if I can find it, and we definitely outlined that in the in one of either the previous paper or the one before that. I'll see if I can find it.
Now, do you want me to? I mean, I'm reasonably close to what's happening with Three Waters because we have so many local authority clients. Do you just want me to give a brief outline of what we don't actually know what's happening yet, but of that 13 billion of debt, about, the LGFA told me they think about 5 billion of it relates to Three Waters. It's probably the biggest part of a council's assets, but we don't actually know how the debt is going to be funded yet. The DIA is still in the process of determining that. But what they have actually said to councils, and this was just last week, was that they don't want them to have too much debt. They don't want to have any debt out past 1 July 24, because that's the date when the Three Waters assets and the new entities will come into being. But that could be problematic, I think, because councils already have debt assigned to Three Waters, which goes past, because they have it in silos, so it goes beyond that 1 July 24. It will have to have some sort of government guarantee, because the LGFA is rated AAA, and a new water entity, if it just was on a standalone basis, would probably be rated in the triple Bs if it had a rating. That's typical infrastructure rating. So what it will need is some sort of not implied, but actually explicit government guarantee to give it the same funding status as the councils enjoy at the moment for their water assets.
Thank you.
Oh, and just going back to that original question, the percentage is 0.41. So as Miles pointed out, and it was in the paper that went to council in June, I think it was, when you approved the proposal to go and consult. So that would mean, as Miles pointed out, if there was 100 million default, ORC's share would be 410,000. but you've got to remember that going to that, the guarantee is the last measure that they would go to. Before they get to that, you've got there's obviously shareholder councils that they can call on that, and borrower notes to also convert to equity as well.
Well, they have that. I don't know if you picked that up, Nicholas, while you're looking for that. So I think they have about 1.4 billion of pre-funding. So they've already got that they can use. They have a $600 million facility from the Debt Management Office, which is the government, which they can increase to 1.5 billion if need be. They've got the borrower notes. They've got uncalled capital, which they've got uncalled share capital, which they could call. So they're in an incredibly sound position. I mean, they managed to weather the first part of COVID in April last year when they had $1 billion bond maturity. And they've actually increased their liquidity measures since then. I think they hold about 400 million of financial market investments for liquidity purposes as well.
Thank you so much.
Right.
Thanks, Miles. I just want to go to Kevin, co-chair of finance. Was there anything that you wanted to cover off, Kevin? You're comfortable?
Yeah, Andrew, I thought I needed to sit back on this one in that I'm being possibly elected for something. That's how I saw it, is that I'll just get you to check that.
Well, you're just being under number 7.
Yeah.
You're being authorised and you're a delegate to execute the documents. I mean, as you know, I'm no expert in conflicts or whatever, but I would think that's a task that I wouldn't have thought you would have had to sit out. It's something that I don't believe you're conflicted in terms of voting on it. It would be my view. But
I just simply to say I'm very comfortable with the process that Mr. Donnelly and everyone's gone through. I see it as an important tool in our in balancing our cash flows and working through the general year's finances. And I think it's also a very good tool that we could possibly help the community. So very comfortable with it. And as our total exposure, I think if my calculations are right, if the whole 13 billion went belly up, we'd have to find about 5.3 million. So it's a pretty sound spot to be in, I think. So, but it's certainly going to be a very good tool for Mr. Donnelly and his team to use to keep our cash flows going good, especially when we're earning such good money on our JB Ware side of things with our invested money. So very good tool and a good concept for the council to go with.
Okay, any further speakers? It's been moved by Hillary, seconded by Gary. That's the 9 recommendations. Once again, I'll just put them all together as one and just ask for councillors just to raise their hand if you're in support of the 9 recommendations. Against? Awesome. That's carried. Thank you. I still see some hands up from Carmen, Gretchen, and it's cool. Okay, no, just thought I'd check. So moving on, item 7.9 was withdrawn. Moving on to 7.10, documents signed under council seal.
Happy to move.
Happy to move by Kate, seconded by Carmen. Any discussion? If not, I'll put that motion. Just raise your hand if you're in favour. Against? Motion carried. Thank you. Moving on to item number 8, recommendations adopted at committee meetings. So the first one, strategy and planning. I heard someone moving. Kate, seconded by Gretchen. Any discussion? If not, raise your hand if you support. This is 8.1. All those in favour, raise your hand. Thank you. Against? Carried.
Moved 8.2, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Michael. Michael Deaker, seconded by Carmen. Raise your hand if you support that motion, please. Against? Carried. Thank you. Chairperson and Chief Executive's report, which has been circulated. Take them as read. Happy to take questions. Marion, and then Alexa. You're on mute, Marion.
Thank you. On the second dot point, Mr. Chairman, you referred to going to Councillor Malcolm and I met with our partners and stakeholders for a coffee and a chat.
Yes.
I want to know whether you explored the option at that meeting of waiting for completion of work by tag.
Not particularly focused on any. It was, as I say, a coffee and a chat. I can't recall saying what we did talk about. That we were at in the process, and MRG, how that process had gone, and that sort of information or that discussion was more. It was offered rather than anything. But as we were working towards the last MRG, it was exactly that, a coffee and a chat. We didn't hone in and say, we didn't have a set agenda to ask the stakeholders, is there a particular scientific work stream that's not complete or anything. We didn't delve into detail. So yeah, it wasn't that sort of conversation.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Alexa.
I'd like to know about when you and Councillor Kelleher visited Robbie Dick.
Oh, yes.
Considering applying for MP, because he's called me and wants me to go and have a look at what he's doing. So I wonder if you can just give me a bit more information about that.
Yeah, so Robbie keeps in touch, and I know he contacts. Well, he's obviously been in touch with you, and has contacted Gary and maybe Michael Laws as well. But he's beavering away, and he and his team, they've got a good thing going, and they can see how beneficial it is to the environment to instead of dumping, for example, pelts, etc., in a landfill, the ability to convert waste such as landfill or horticultural waste, supermarket waste, etc., they just see a great value in being able to return those types of waste products back to the environment, so to speak. So it sort of completes the cycle. So I suppose the challenges that he's got, he's probably getting to the end of his working life. He's having to move away from that particular site. So he's leasing the current site, but that lease terminates, I think, in about 2 years' time or thereabouts. But he's looking to relocate somewhere in and around Cromwell. He asked about, this is more recently, this wasn't when Gary and I visited him, but I don't believe it was to do with the Ministry for the Environment, or was it MPI, sorry, asking about funding simply because he could see there was an opportunity to work with the dairy industry. He could see that dewatered waste material from a dairy farm operation, where you could use worms to obviously break down the dung or the solids, so to speak. So that's why he felt that he may get some support from the government department. So that's, I suppose, the broad issues that he raised with us. one thing he did mention was, the piece of land that he's got is, I believe it's Central Otago District Council, and it was something that Gary and I were going to raise with the mayor at Mayor of Central Otago District at some stage to see whether Central Otago could provide some level of support in terms of finding him another location, even though he has got one in mind, but that hasn't been, he hasn't made that decision yet. But yeah, he's obviously got a viable business, and it's environmentally beneficial. And yeah, he's passionate about using earthworms to help those processes to, minimise waste, I suppose, when it can be recycled.
So you are considering going and talking to CODC and to see how we can help or
support. I couldn't see any reason why raising it with Tim Cadogan. He may well be aware of Robbie Dick's situation. I don't know. I haven't had a chance to talk to me and Tim, but it was just something that I thought, well, we could provide support. Why are we got any interest at all? I just, it obviously aligns with our waste plan, which is obviously currently being reviewed. Plan change 1 is going through a review process, but this is part of the business that we're in.
Thanks. That gives me good background. Thank you.
Okay. Gary?
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. And I'd actually like to echo everything you've just said. To me, going along there with you that day, and what I saw really was a really hard-working couple who are probably at the stage where what they've achieved could be exponentially bigger and in a lot of different areas, but it certainly, to me, fitted really well with everything that we would be hoping for that will be happening around recycling and their byproduct, and then how their byproduct was used, and or their actual product that they create. And they noted that councils and sort of other government bodies, there's a use for it, and some use it already in their planter boxes and in the things that they do in their gardens and parks. And it is something very positive. Their accolade board that they had in their shed was absolutely astounding on who was visiting there and noting and appreciating what they did. And I was just sort of, maybe it's a question to Sarah just around, well, is the ORC, is there awareness of just what is happening in this little operation? And is there other possible ways that we might be able to support it? I will definitely be talking to Tim Cadogan just around, the possibilities of them supporting them when it comes to another site.
Sarah, did you want to respond?
I can't answer on the fly the question about whether we're aware of the operation or our engagement with it. I just want to caution you that we probably would have a regulatory role for consenting in any new site. That's all. So we need to make sure that we don't compromise that.
Thank you. Michael Deaker.
Yeah, Andrew and Gary, could you tell me what Wormworks actually produces? Is it a kind of topsoil? Is it compost? What's the product?
I'll let you cover that, Gary, if you like.
Yeah, pretty much worms. And I think it is a soil and sort of compost type mix as well. But yeah, the worm composite that they have, and then the varying uses for it, was very unique to me. But it was just the stuff that they were receiving. It's not really, well, there is farm product there, but there's food waste and other stuff that, where else could it go? And fruit waste, and it was going there, and what a great use for it.
Can I just jump in there for a minute, Andrew?
Yes.
So I've been close to that operation, well, not close to it, but I've known about it for years and years and visited there several times. But it produces a compost, Councillor Deaker, that you can take away or use, and that's what the councils use it for. But it also, you're also right, Gary, it produces worms. You can write to them, and you can get worms in a can to put in your own worm farms and things like that.
Thank you.
It's basically a waste processing, waste to resource processing, and which is awesome. It's in Windrose. of rows of worms. But anyway, yeah, there it is. It is an awesome operation, but of course, reusing and turning things into compost is the last stage of something. It's a lot of energy that goes before that.
The first visit to the operation, I don't know, it might have been 6 or 8 months ago, and they were, on that particular day, they were packaging up containers of worms and they were sending them through to Auckland. They were going through overnight courier and were being sold in the Auckland market. Possibly, I'm not 100% sure who the retailer is, or whether it's through even a wholesaler. I'm not sure, but they were going to the Auckland market anyway.
Sounds great.
Any other queries? If not, any queries for Sarah? Alexa?
Are you on Sarah's report now?
Yes, I was just going to go to, yep.
I would very much like it if at some stage, doesn't have to be this morning, we could go into public excluded and get an update on where we're at with the driver's pay issue.
Okay, we are going to end up in public excluded at some stage later on, so perhaps that can be covered off then. That'd be right, Sarah. Okay.
I'd like to get an update on the future for local government workshop, if possible, Sarah. Also, the Ngāi Tahu Takiwā approach. Yeah, there's a couple of things in here I'd like a little bit more info on.
Sure. Yes, the chair has probably attended the most recent Ngāi Tahu Takiwā approach seminar, because I was on the Three Waters Steering Group Zoom all day on Monday. But the Future for Local Government workshop, we obviously had that, and then also there is some work that's being done by a subgroup of regional sector CEs. We wrote a brief and we are getting some advice. So it's not our opinion, it's the opinion of our advisors, just around the future of local government and particular areas that lend themselves to thinking about perhaps in different ways. I'm just on an email trail at the moment where that looks like it'll go to the regional sector group meeting, which is planned for the 3rd of September. And that will be really food for further conversation. So yeah, the idea is that it's an input into the review. It's not intended to be a position. It's just some advice from a couple of people who know the sector well, but are no longer part of the sector, I guess. The other question you asked was about the Takiwā approach, and perhaps Andrew can add to this, but there is an ongoing conversation that's taking place around what this 4th water entity would look like, the Takiwā approach. There are sort of conversations that are occurring with just local government politicians and CEs, and then conversations that are occurring with Ngāi Tahu. You'll see that of recent days, the South Island Takiwā mayors and chairs have written to the government seeking a pause on the reform, on the Three Waters reform. Largely, I think there are some points made around let's wait for the review of local government to see what that tells us. I think it's not entirely clear what weighting would achieve. And I think the other thing is that there is still a lot of misunderstanding of some of the finer detail of the proposed reform. So when I attend the LGNZ seminars that are being put on at the moment for local government, some of the questions that are being asked suggest to me that, yeah, there is still not a clear picture. Some of the issues that are being raised are around the proposed co-governance model. So that's co-governance with mana whenua. I think also there is confusion between the role of Taumata Arawai and the reforms. I think there's also perhaps a situation where I think perhaps people think the option is either status quo or reform, and actually it's not. Status quo will not exist because Taumata Arawai will be in place, and regardless of whether you're a local government or whether you are part of a water entity, you will have standards to meet, and the way that those standards are enforced is going to be different. So it's not going to be the same as it is at the moment. And I guess that's where some of the confusion lies. I think anyone who thinks that they can opt out and stay the same is probably not understanding that that's not actually an option. So yeah, still quite a lot of debate around the country. Some councils have come out and said it's not for us, but there is an 8-week period that we're in at the moment where local governments are able to consolidate their knowledge, work with DIA and others. There's a whole lot of information that's particular to each local government that DIA have put together. So to build that understanding of how the reform has been put together, and also how each local government will be impacted. At the end of those 8 weeks, as I understand it, the Minister will take feedback and go back to Cabinet, I think.
Thank you very much. I've also got some questions around the bus ones, but I think we better bring those into excluded. Thank you.
Okay, and the only thing I can add to Sarah's comments is that letter that's just recently been signed and sent to the Minister of Local Government is in terms of asking for a pause is to try and take advantage, if there was a pause, to better inform councils, particularly elected members and their communities, just to try and, I suppose, bring a high level of understanding of what the challenges are and how they could potentially be resolved. And also, and the other aspect that Sarah did touch on is this: it's so variable across even the South Island. When you look at the TAs across the South Island, where some see it and completely see it as a great opportunity, and others see it as quite different in that regard. But yeah, so we've got Kevin.
Just Mrs. Gardner, just on what you've said on Three Waters. So us as the regulator, whether my council's in or out, we're going to regulate to the new standards. Simple as that, isn't it? They're not going to get a free pass by opting out.
No.
But that's not to say that they can't still meet those standards.
No, that's right. But I think what the reform is founded on is the assessment that's been done out of Scottish Water and the economic regulator in Scotland, using our New Zealand data. And at the highest level, what that shows is that in order to meet those standards, the cost to a ratepayer is less in nearly every case if that standard meeting is done and delivered through a water entity as opposed to a local government.
Good. Thanks for your help. Thank you.
Okay. no further questions. Someone like to move that both the chairperson's report and chief executive's report be noted. Moved Carmen, seconded Alexa. No further discussion. I'll put both those motions. If you just raise your hand in support. Against. Both motions carried. Thank you. Okay, moving on to the notice of motion from Michael Laws, 10.1.
Thank you. This notice of motion arose out of 2 councillor-only meetings and our most recent one. The aim is simply to improve communication between governance and the executive in a formal sense, and to ensure that we're all on the same page, and that communication is seen as the absolute essence of that. It's not designed as a threat or criticism of anybody. In fact, it's designed to ensure that there is a more harmonious working relationship between governance and the executive, and for that process to be facilitated through the goodwill of all parties. Thank you to Councillor Scott for seconding this motion. It was as a result of a discussion that this notice of motion between the two of us, that this notice of motion was prompted, but it comes out of a general view that came from around the governance table in our last 2 councillor-only sessions.
Thank you, Brian.
I now have some concerns about this motion. And my question to you as the chair and to the deputy chair is whether you want to consider going into public excluded. I raised some concerns in relation to the deputy chair and also comment on the chair. These are potentially employment matters, whether you want to go into public excluded, or I can continue to talk.
No, that's fine. We're actually nearly at that point anyway. So, look, I'm happy that we deal with it in publicly excluded.
Cool.
Yep, Alexa.
I just, you mentioned employment matters, and I realise a lot of people are watching this video on YouTube or watching our live stream or will watch it later. And I think we should make it very clear that the employment matters is nothing to do with the performance of our CE at this point. Is that correct? Or can we please clarify that?
That's 100%. That's 100% from my perspective. This is from the matters I want to raise, specifically in relation to the role of deputy chair and also potentially the role of chair.
Hang on,
as
just
the
before
mover
I
of
go
the
to
motion.
Michael. Hang on, just before, Michael.
Sure.
Alexa, can I just confirm and support exactly what you've said? This is not a matter that of in any way, shape or form with CEO performance. This is a matter of governance, sorting out, the best way to have a governance lens on a regular basis across, matters that are being dealt with on a weekly basis. And from my perspective, I've had the approach that, as and when required. And to be fair, that's not good enough. And I accept that, we need to, have better lines of communication. But if I just sense that Brian wants to delve into this a bit more, and I think, to have a more constructive conversation, I think in non-public is a good idea.
I'm happy to move to go into public excluded.
Okay, I'll just, before you do, I'll just, that's fine. That might be a good idea. We deal with that now. Di, are you able to, or Liz?
Hang on, the other 2 questioners, do they want to speak in public or public excluded? You've got 2 other hands up.
Well, one's Brian's. Michael's, I just assume Michael might have been seconding the motion, or not. Michael Deaker?
No, I certainly wasn't. I'm speaking on the motion and on Brian's point. I see this motion as in principle. It's not personalised to councillors Noon and Laws. It's a good motion. I don't care who the chair and the deputy chair are. It's something that should happen. So I'm going to support the motion. I don't believe it needs to go into public excluded. It's just a good procedure that we as a council should adopt, whoever the chair and the deputy happen to be.
Okay. Sorry,
Point
Michael.
of order. Point of order, Andrews. Sorry.
Is it
I think
Hillary?
we've-
Sorry. Okay.
yeah.
Sorry.
We've just been alerted to by Liz to the thought that we need to say, and if we were going to go into non-public, in any case, we'd need to show that we had a reason to go into non-public. And I don't know what the reason is to go into non-public, but if it was to protect natural persons, and those persons would be the chair and the deputy chair, and those two don't want to be protected, I don't see that that option is available.
Yeah. Well, I was just working on Brian's suggestion that the focus is on the chair and deputy chair.
Hey, if the chair and the deputy chair are fine to talk in public, no problem with me.
Okay, righto. I'm comfortable with that. Michael
Can I
Laws?
speak?
No, not yet. I'll come back to you in a second. Michael Laws.
The reason that this isn't in public is because we were advised by our staff properly that there were no good reasons to go into public.
You mean not public?
Non-public.
Yeah, originally it
Are we
was
going back to
intended.
standing orders again, are we?
Well, yes, we are going back to standing orders, and this was as
Non-public?
Hang on, Brian.
excuse me,
One at a time.
interpreted by our staff, and I have no intention of disagreeing with them, that this matter or this item could not be heard in private for reasons that there was no good reason under the Local Government Official Information and Meetings Act for it to be so. And that is why it is in public currently.
So we've got a motion on the table, moved and seconded. I'll notice a motion. So that's the point of discussion. Brian?
Yep, sure. Because I have concerns around the role of deputy chair, I previously indicated I would second this motion. And the reason I did so was an endeavour to make this role more constructive, proactive, working positively with staff and a regional focus. However, I now realise that it is more important to get a better structure and expectation around this role. It needs, in my view, an up-to-date job description. I also suggest we should take the same opportunity for the chair. Both roles need to be constructive and align with ORC aims and values. So I'm going to withdraw my seconding of the written motion, and I would like to either an amendment or a separate motion at some point to instead say that job descriptions be agreed for the deputy chair and chair. And in my view, that would be a positive step forward in terms of our concerns regarding the governance processes.
So just so
Mr. Chairman, can I respond?
Well, no, just before you do that, Michael, you've withdrawn seconding the notice of motion. Is that correct, Brian?
Correct.
Okay. So Hillary, are you seconding the notice of motion? Okay. Michael Laws.
I have no objection to what Brian is suggesting. And
Cool.
if he wishes to put together a notice of motion for the next meeting, outlining his thoughts as to whether or not job descriptions are required for leadership functions, I think that's a good debate to have. All I'm suggesting, and Councillor Michael sort of added it, is this is nothing to do with personalities. This is to do with a process by which communication occurs between the governance and our chief executive as the head of the staff. So it's a communication device. And it's something, as I said, that simply encapsulates what we have discussed in 2 council-only meetings just recently.
Okay, I'm going to go. No, hang on, Brian. I'm going to go to Gretchen speaking to the motion, and then Kevin. Then I'll come back to you, Brian.
Thank you.
We did talk about this as a council, but to me it is publicly embarrassing that we need to specify that our chair and our deputy need to meet with our chief executive at a certain time every week. It's kind of like reporting, I'm not going to say that, it's kind of like reporting to the principal once a week. It's, it's unnecessary. Surely we can get on, we can meet, we can talk. We don't need to have a formal motion for that.
Okay. Thank you. Kevin?
Look, I'd just like to endorse Councillor Deeker's remarks on this motion and fully support it. And it certainly isn't a reflection on any person's performance. It's simply a matter of getting keeping the things really focused for everyone, and I'm sure it will assist the CE immensely in making sure that governance is in line with what she's trying to achieve so well. Thank you.
Okay. Brian?
Yeah, look, I'm all for communication, and that's why I supported Councillor Laws in the original motion, and I genuinely did. But, you know, I've come to the realisation, as I said before, there's no sense communicating unless there's some type of structure and positive focus going forward. Communication needs to be constructive. And based on the past, well, there's going to have to be some changes. And that, so I can't see why we can't actually put a second motion to include job descriptions for the deputy chair and chair. And if that was to be done, I would support both motions, but they need to be hand in hand. No sense delaying it until next meeting. There's no need. Here we are.
Okay, we'll just deal with what we've got in front of us at the moment. The one motion.
The only point is, I'm not going to support this motion unless the other one is supported, because they go hand in hand.
Well, I took it from Michael Laws's response, Brian, is that he said something along the lines that he wasn't against the idea of working on, as you say, a job description for both the chair and deputy chair. So if that motion,
well, if that's the case, then I will agree to the communication. But why can't we hear them as one motion and a separate motion to follow? Why can't we do that?
You move it, Brian. I'll second it.
Cool.
Well, we just need to deal with this one that's on the table first.
Okay. Well, I will support Councillor Law's motion on the basis of the second motion, and as seconded by Councillor DK following it.
Okay. So you've foreshadowed that. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Righto. Hilary, then Gary.
I fully support this. I think that we've had some awkwardnesses as a result of people having expectations that weren't being met, but that weren't reasonably articulated in the first place. And I think it's really helpful to reinforce that the council appreciates our chair and deputy and the head of our operations, namely our CE, all getting together and nutting things out on a regular basis. I think it's a very helpful thing to do, and I don't see it as a matter of going to see the headmaster. I'm not sure which of those three is the headmaster in that sort of role play, but I see it as senior people getting together to help the ORC function more smoothly and give those three people a heads up that we endorse that happening more regularly, and that we think that them getting together is a good thing.
Gary?
Yeah, thank you. I completely support the initial motion. I think all this really is just formalising what a structure should be, but for interactions between our chair, our deputy chair, and our CE, and it gives some certainty to all three of those parties, whoever they are, that there is at least a base standard that would be expected of those roles. And when we look at previous positions of chairs and deputy chairs and their location-wise, we had chairs and deputy chairs closer to the head office than we currently do. So I think it's just formalising that so that those standing for those positions understand that they have an expectation of either being there and maybe either by Zoom or by person for at least once or twice a week or whatever we decide on that. So I fully support it. I don't support the concept that this is publicly embarrassing. I think it's just putting structure in place, and I don't support the secondary motion when it comes to job descriptions for each of these roles. Thank you.
Any further speakers? If not, I will put the motion. Once again, just raise your hand if you. Oh, sorry, Sarah.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if you would give me leave to speak, please.
Absolutely, Sarah.
I made it plain to the chair when this notice of motion came up that I was more than happy to have these conversations. That's not an issue for me. I meet with Councillor Calvert probably more often than anyone, and I don't think she's ever had a problem with being able to access me in that way. So I just want to say that I welcome the conversation. I'm not entirely sure that the wording of the motion is correct in terms of the way it's worded around operational. Sorry, my iPad has just gone off me. Where am I? Reviewing ORC operations. I'm not sure that that's entirely the correct way to say it. But I just want to be clear that I think since the chair has been the chair, I have probably had, I was lucky, one meeting a month with the chair on a formal setting and a one-on-one. So, if you feel that there's a communication problem, then I'm happy to have more regular meetings. Thank you.
Thank you. No further speakers. You've already spoken, Brian. Actually, twice. I've been pretty lenient, unless it's a question.
With respect, Mr. Chair, the CE has given you some feedback and you haven't taken it on board. My point is that in terms of review, the words reviewing ORC operations should be removed. It's simply a weekly communication between the chair, deputy chair, and CE.
Look.
Well, what's your response to what your CE said?
In terms of the lack of communication?
No, what she just said, that she had concerns about the wording around focus on operations.
Yeah, well, I suppose that, look, operationally, that's the CE's responsibility, but I would imagine from time to time, operationally, there may be some communication.
What it actually says is for the purpose of reviewing ORC operations.
Hang on, Brian. Do you want me to finish?
Well, I'm not sure. Have you listened?
Well, hang on. Okay. Well, I suggest you just give me about 30 seconds. All I'm saying is that Sarah's raised that concern about review of operations. So I took it that comment was around just understanding whether there were issues, operational issues, that Sarah from time to time would want to share with the chair and deputy chair. Okay.
That's fair enough.
And no other speakers. You've still got your hand up, Brian. So I assume that you.
Sorry.
Okay. No further speakers. I'll put the motion. If you raise your hand, you support the motion. All those in favour, raise your hand.
Aye.
Against?
Oh, against actually.
What? I think we'll go to a division because yeah. Could you do that for us, Di? Thank you.
Yep, sure. Councillor Calvert,
Yes.
Councillor Decker,
Yes.
Councillor Forbes, Councillor Hobbs,
No.
Councillor Hope,
Yes.
Councillor Kelleher,
Yes.
Councillor Laws,
Yes.
Councillor Malcolm,
Yes.
Councillor Noon,
Yes.
Councillor Robertson,
No.
Councillor Scott,
No.
Councillor Wilson.
Abstaining.
So 7 yes, 4 no, and 1 abstained.
Thank you, Di. So motion carried. Right, moving. Are we moving on from this topic?
Yes.
No.
No. Brian can't discuss that topic now. It's got to go to the next council meeting. There's been no motion. There's been no indication that there is a notice of motion connected with that issue. So it needs to go to the next council meeting.
It was connected. It was connected to this motion.
So we were dealing with
In your mind, it was, Brian.
We were dealing with a notice of motion on that particular topic. So if the idea of having a job description for chair and deputy chair, it seems that the proper process would be that it would come through either a notice of motion at a later council meeting.
Correct.
With respect, Mr. Chair and Mr. Deputy Chair, Brian did foreshadow a motion. I foreshadowed that I would second it.
Yep.
Why are you not accepting that?
Because I got through the chat room. This is from Liz. If you go to the chat room, it's got this is a notice of motion that was properly notified, and then it goes on to say Council Laws was to withdraw it, then you would replace it with a second one. It doesn't need to be, otherwise it will lapse. Any additional motions will need to be properly notified. So I made that call based on that advice.
I withdraw. Thank you.
Okay, moving on. We've got, well, that finishes the public part of the council meeting. I will move that we move into non-public as set out on the audit paper, seconded by Kate. I'll put that motion, just raise your hand. All in favour? Against? Carried. I imagine we just need a minute or two to adjust from public to non-public.